Hello. I'm here waiting for MaryAnn, who's going to join us in a moment. We're going to be talking about the overlap or intersection of gender and consent and how they relate to each other and our personal experiences that involve both and how they tie in. MaryAnn is on their way. You can follow them at The Kindling Kind. They should be here any second. There they are. I'm Mia Schachter. I am at Consent Wizard. I'm a consent educator and intimacy coordinator for TV and film based in Los Angeles on unceded Tongva land. Here's MaryAnn. I'll let them introduce themselves. There you are. Hello.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you about this.
Me too. I just introduced myself, so you can introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm MaryAnn George. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a coach, an artist, a facilitator based in Brooklyn. Lately, I've been working a lot around gender because it's something that affects me and it's something I'm excited to be talking about. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about it today.
Yeah, me too. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect.
So, I mean, I wanted to talk to you specifically about this because I think we kind of met through this work and it seemed to like resonate with you so deeply and really affect you. And also I think we sort of have similar approaches to like our business. Like businesses are sort of similarly structured. We offer courses, we offer one-on-ones and stuff. And then we also have related a lot over gender stuff. So I would love to hear from you where you initially saw the link between gender and consent, and then I can share some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I would love that. Like you said, consent really deeply resonated with me. I was working as a pro dom before the pandemic and as a server in a lot of other realms. And when I came to the first class that I took with you and saw the consent wheel, I was like, oh my gosh. And at the same time, I was going through a lot of gender exploration of my own. And there was just this real anger and grief of like, I didn't consent to this. Like, this is infuriating that before I was even born, because of something someone saw on a sonogram, this whole life was like decided. All these things were like decided for me, and the way I was going to be talked to and raised and socialized, and it's just extremely upsetting. So going through like months and months of anger and grief over that, and just being like, oh my God, like there's so many things we don't consent to in these systems of oppression. And for me, like gender is one where I get really caught up with, because I'm like, why are we still doing this? There's so many things we could change really quickly, but that one for me is always like, you can just decide like right now, today, and move forward with like totally different. I know it's more complex than that. There's many layers, but the basics, I'm like, we can just make a decision and people won't have to experience this trauma from living in this place of like so many decisions being made for them before they're even born. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. I can always talk more personally about it, but that's the general overview, and I'm excited to hear where you're at with it.
Yeah, it's something that when I developed that yes to no spectrum that I work with so much, I was not thinking beyond like internally.
Mm-hmm.
Up maybe in the last 9 months to a year or so is the way that it really applies to systems of oppression, the structures in which we live. And so for anyone who hasn't seen that yes to no spectrum, the yes side of maybe has a lot to do with checking in with myself. What do I want to do? What do I like? What will that feel like to me? That's things like curiosity or like challenging yourself, trying new things. And then on the no side, it's really all about how others are going to perceive you. And that's like, I should do this so that people think this of me. Or if I don't do this, my reputation will suffer, things like that. And gender has come up now as one of these things that tracks really well onto that spectrum, where there are so many things that I do because of how other that have to do with my gender, because of how other people are going to perceive me. And with a person of my gender identity, or a person with, cis women, cis woman passing privilege, like I'm sort of constantly playing this like balancing game where it's like there's certain things that I have to do to seem feminine enough to be like non-threatening, for example. And then there's certain things that I have to do to fight against the femininity that is assumed of me in order to be heard or taken seriously. And so it's just this sort of like push pull, towing this line. And it's all based in like assumptions from my prior experience. Like it's almost never grounded in like me and this person beginning at this moment in time. And then there's also been these questions around legibility, where like, I'm thinking about having said that I use they them pronouns, and then with like certain family members or certain people where it's like in order for them to be like willing to see me any different way or willing to use my pronouns, they have to see a visual indicator that I'm different. Whether that's like my clothing or my hair or makeup or lack thereof, or if they see cleavage, that they're going to think, well, then you can't really be whatever it is that you say that you are. So there's a lot of stuff around legibility that we do for the sake of other people in a sense, but it's also for ourselves in the sense of safety. So it's like, I want to have my identity respected, or for someone else it might be like I want to be read as like legible as a man or legible as a woman, so that I'm not heckled at walking down the street, or so that I'm not like physically threatened by people when I leave my house. And it's very hard to parse out like what of those desires around legibility are like because they would feel good to me. And I'm not interested in figuring out whether it's like, do I want it because it's societally prescribed, or do I want it because I actually want it? Because we cannot answer that question ever. And at the end of the day, I feel like if you want it, and that's the end of it. But I do think that there's value in looking at like, do I want this thing, now? Am I doing this for me, or am I doing it so that I'm read a certain way? And you can still ultimately decide, I'm doing it because I want to be read a certain way. That's fine. That's important. But I think the recognition of it is what like honors our body and tells our body like, I'm listening to you. I hear you, that like maybe it doesn't feel good to bind my chest, for example. Or I hear you that I'm exhausted, you're exhausted, and you don't feel like putting on makeup today. But we're going to do it because it's in service of our safety. So that acknowledgement around like the ways that these systems dictate how we should and shouldn't be, it has so much to do with consent to me.
Yeah, that resonates so strongly for me. I mean, even just a few months ago, someone was asking me about surgery, and I was like, oh man, like a cis person asking me about surgery is like, this does not feel good. Like, this really takes into like my transness and how it relates to you and how you understand it and what that means for you. And I know they were trying to do me a favor, like by offering that, but I was like, that's not, oof, no. And even like when we look at medical transitions, which we don't need to talk about further, but I just want to make the note that they're even super rooted in a cis binary. So like, let's be really careful around how we talk about anything to do with gender, because it's so like, it's root, like everything you're saying resonates, and I'm like, it's just so rooted in like this like land, we're like in the land of cisness. And so how do you exist in that land in a consensual way with yourself and with others? It's really complex.
Yeah. I think another piece around gender for me is like, how do I let these systems work through me?
Yes.
Like if I am, I mean, and I work on this uh, constantly, and I think that I feel good about the place that I'm in around it, but I know that I'm probably in the minority. Like if I am judging someone else for something that they do. I mean, I'm thinking like of a time when I that
Yeah.
like armpit hair was weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a way that I am allowing the gender binary and that particular system of oppression to work through me, through my actions, through my language, through my body. Um, and I think for people with more privilege, like letting those systems work through them, whether it's in the form of like not examining your preferences, not examining like your fat phobia, transphobia, homophobia, sexism, etc. And then, you know, like buying into stereotypes or projecting stereotypes, all those ways that we perpetuate the harm of these systems, like gender is a really big one. And I think when it comes to consent, having a practice that constantly and very like effortlessly at a certain point allows you to check in with yourself and really ask, like, do I believe this? Is
Yeah.
this the way that I want to be in the world? Or is it something that I'm kind of like parroting because I've heard it before?
I love that. That resonates a lot. And I also think like whenever anyone asks me for advice about being more inclusive, which like in its own, like that word means that we're like including and not coming from a place of justice to begin with. But to like the advice I always give, like the first place is like, what is your intention?
Mm.
And how are you in consent? Like how are you like questioning what's where you're coming from, and then how you're interacting with others, and how are you giving people their power back? Like how are you empowering people to make their decisions and inform you of those decisions? And it's like it can like the starting place can be that simple. And if you do that, like there's just already like you've just grown in this like incredible way, and you've already become safer for so many people, including yourself. And something that I find so interesting is whenever I talk about gender in public, which is more and more often, I get a lot of feedback from folks who are cis or identify as cis, telling me about their gender trauma. And I'm like, whoa, not only did I not consent to hear your gender trauma via DM, this is proof that the gender binary is oppressive to all of us. So like feel free to question it. Like you don't need to be trans or non-binary or gender blessed or gender nonconforming to question the gender binary. You can question it right now, no matter what your gender is, no matter where you fall on any which spectrum we're talking about. And I think that's one way that like you do that as a service to yourself, like you're talking about checking in with yourself, and you also do that as a service to everyone you interact with. um, it's funny, I was just talking to my mom about like how much I wish she had examined her own gender when I was growing up, and how much that would have helped me. And I've had a few parents reach out to me about if I offer classes for teenagers, and not yet. Those are like I'm working on them, but I tell them like number one advice at this moment is like, have you explored your gender? Like you may be like a cis woman who's a mom to like a non-binary or trans teenager, but like you doing your own gender exploration is gonna like and really questioning that and being in consent with yourself is gonna like deeply change the way you interact with your child and your trans and non-binary family members and community members. Like I believe that so deeply. I'm like, I've seen it to be true, I know it to be true. And I think when we practice consent with ourselves is when we get so much better at practicing with everyone else. And I think you've even posted like I'm the one who violates my own consent the most. Oh yeah, that.
Oh,
Oh
yeah. Yeah, I love that point. When I teach that yes to no spectrum, like what you're saying hits so hard because I so often come upon this question where I teach the yes to no spectrum and immediately someone is like, "How do you help other people figure out where they are?" And you figure out where you are, what it feels like to be at each of these points for yourself. And then you know what questions to ask. I mean, it also reminds me of like when Betty Martin, who built the Wheel of Consent, like she talks about how the best way to be good at serving or the best way to get good at giving is to learn to receive.
Yes.
It's so hard to know how to figure out what other people want if you are not in touch with what you want and how you like to be served, right? Like being able to ask the questions of like, how does this feel? What could I do differently? Like opening up for feedback is, you're going to be so much better at that if you know the kind of feedback you would like to give. So this point about, and you know, I've talked to other people about this too, like Sarah of Comprehensive Consent. It's like, so often parents are like, how do I teach my kids consent? And it's like, well, how are you learning consent?
Yeah.
You know, how are you bringing that into your life? And I love that you're putting gender in there as well. If you want to be supportive to the gender nonconforming people in your life, ask those questions for yourself too.
Yeah.
I think it's such a, I mean, the word travesty is coming to mind, but that feels a little traumatic, but it's such a travesty that the only people working to dismantle these ideas and these like really oppressive, strict notions of how we're supposed to be in the world are the trans and non-binary people and not cis people. I mean, I have a few cis people who are very close to me who I think do this work. They do ask questions. And those are the people that I trust to advocate for me because they're not just reading text and then like repeating shit that I told them to say or that from that article that I sent them or whatever, you know. It's like they're actually turning to people who are being transphobic or not aware and being like, well, what does that mean to you? Because here's what this means to me.
Yeah, I love that so much. And that's the thing I feel like I'm such a champion of is like, look, the gender binary is harmful to everyone. It's harmful to certain people more than it is to others. Like there's a spectrum of violence, absolutely. But I don't know anybody that perfectly fits or has consented to like being the ideal man or the ideal woman or like falling into one of those places. And so it's like, I just deeply feel that if anyone honestly examines their relationship to that binary, they're going to find places where they're like, no, I'm not, this doesn't fit me. This doesn't suit me.
Right. Who made that up?
Yeah, like we can all relate to that. Like that's, and the fact that we put the burden, like the onus, like so squarely on trans and non-binary and non-gender conforming folks, gender non-conforming folks is, to me, it makes it so much worse. It's like, oh my God, it's like, I mean, you know, I for me as a trans person of color, I've thought so much about how this like relates to anti-racism work, and I just am always like, yeah, we can't just ask the oppressed group to do all like, what are we doing? What is that?
Yeah, well, right. And we've also like we've made absolutely certain that the most oppressed group is also like the most under-resourced, and then they're supposed to like find resources to like spend time and energy dismantling this shit for everyone else to educate them. I was gonna say, you know, something that someone named Umu in my educator training, they're on Instagram at Connect with Umu, OU. They added something brilliant to the yes to no spectrum on the no side, which was the thought, this is how it's always been.
Wow. Oof. Yes.
Yeah. So
I love that.
like anytime I have that thought, and I posted about it today, in terms of like capitalism and think about the ways that you know, I don't consent to capitalism working through me, and the ways that it manifests are like scarcity, urgency, you know, not knowing my worth, like settling for less, burnout, and things like that. And so this idea of like, this is how it's always been, you know, I'm also thinking about like the IATSE strike and what's going on in the entertainment business, and like having no boundaries as like a badge of honor that people in the entertainment business wear. You know, like not having a work-life balance, never seeing your family, that people are sort of like, you know, it's like burnout Olympics or something like that. And how thinking about it in terms of like, this is how things have always been is such a conservative mentality. And when we think about gender and people do say this is how it's always been, that's actually patently false.
Yes.
That's not true. It's historically, that's bogus. Like, you know, whatever, like whether it's fashion of like Alok Vaid-Menon and like heels and stories around, you know, dresses and makeup and things like that, or if it's like men have always been the workers and women have always been the blah blah blah. And then like you look at ancient Jewish text and they talk about having 9 genders. Like it has not always been this way. And there's something really sinister that I've noticed, and I haven't quite been able to put my finger on it, but like there's something really sinister about the ways that these systems of oppression, whether it's white supremacy, sexism, transphobia, gender binary, so on and so forth, capitalism, they make us think that this is how things have always been. There's this really strange like erasure of history so that we all conform. And I spoke to Xenon Universe, who was on my podcast, about conformity as like a major social toxin, insecurity and conformity. Because when you preach that people need to conform, and when you make people insecure by marketing to them that X, Y, and Z is wrong with them, and all they need to do is like purchase this thing that you sell in order to feel better about themselves, you get people to enact these systems on other people. And they do that through judgment, through pity, through shame, you know, through guilt, through all these icky feelings. That was a rant.
I loved it. And it made me think about when you just said, like, you know, this is the way it's always been. And when you talk about the yes no spectrum, and the first reaction people have is like, how can I empower someone else?
Yeah.
And it's like, start here. Start right here. I think we're just so complicit in these systems without knowing, because there's just so many power dynamics at play. And it's like almost like as soon as we become aware of a power dynamic, we're like, we just want to push outward and be like, how do we save other people?
Right.
You
well, but that's
it too.
I mean, I think that's codependency at work. When your first instinct is, how do I help other people with this, before you know how to do it for yourself. That's codependency. And I think that that's like part of what I'm getting at when I talk about consent and capitalism, is because I think we you know, if you ask anyone who identifies as an anti-capitalist, if they want their friends to be resourced and like make money, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to ourselves, we're like, I shouldn't make money. I need to be like a you know, a Spartan hermit, like, you know, wear clothes until they're falling apart, and like at the expense often of self-expression, at the expense of authenticity, at the expense of beauty, you know, all these things that like, why do we think that we're not allowed those things, but we want for all of our friends and for our community? And so it really is starting here. That was like a huge wake-up call for me, I don't know, maybe around a year ago, where I was like, living with my parents, I was making no money, and I was, you know, clearly making an impact for people. And I was working on this like outrageous sliding scale from like $25 to $125 or something. And I was just burning the candle at both ends. I mean, I was not going to make it. And eventually I had to really look at the work that I was doing. And I was like, this work is the purpose of this work is to help other people become more resourced. Yeah. I cannot do that from an under-resourced place, because it is impossible, but also because it's hypocritical.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And I also feel like that was one thing that came to mind too when you were saying this is the way it's always been, and when we were talking about the burden and the under-resourced. It's like, I actually don't consent to do this work and not benefit from it. I don't, just because I'm trans and non-binary, like I don't consent to like unpack gender for other people without like huge return.
Yeah.
Like I was in a workshop, and someone had hired me to teach about trans safety, and someone asked me a question, and I was like, I'm going to answer your question. And I also just want to like really make sure that we take a moment and you understand that I'm answering this question in this space because I've been paid a price that feels very, very good for me to offer this information to you. If you asked me this at a party, I would be so offended. I would feel violated. So like, let's just really know that like the context in which this is happening is consensual. But if money hadn't been exchanged, I would not I would not only not be answering this question, I would be sending you an article or a resource about why you shouldn't be asking me this question. And judgment around that question, just to really be like, there needs to be exchange. Like this, there can't be this burden of emotional labor without exchange. Like it's not okay.
Right. Yeah, I mean the assumption that like because you love your work or because you're interested in these topics that you should not make money. Like the reason I'm so good at what I do is because I love what I do, which I would think means that you should pay me more.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So, I guess we have a couple minutes here. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we talk about in terms of gender and consent?
I just feel like I think that I want to just empower everybody and myself included to like, we can shift this. Like you can be in consent around your own gender. You can work to create like a more consensual space within gender. Like that is possible. Like that is work that we could all do. And honestly, the more people that do it, the easier it becomes. Like I dream of a tipping point when like I was once on a call with, it was like 20, a 20 person Zoom call, and everybody on it was trans. And at the end of it, it was really sweet. And at the end of it, someone asked me, oh, so like how many like trans women and trans men and non-binary people? And I was like, oh, no, when I'm in a trans only space, like I'm not clocking or noticing gender at all, like actually at all. Like my assumption is that I'm never going to fully understand my own gender, much less someone else's. So I'm not even trying actually in those spaces. It's like that's been like pushed out of the center, and it's incredible. And so I dream of like that tipping point. So I just really want to like empower anyone who's listening or will watch this. Like you can make decisions no matter what your gender is. You can make decisions like to become complicit in a new system, in like a new way of being with gender, of being in consent, of being with your own gender, with other people's gender. There's just so many ways that we can like push through this, and the more people doing this work, the quicker it will be. Yeah, that's like my number one. I'm like, we can do it. I know we can.
We can do it.
Yeah.
I know that. I know it's true. Well, MaryAnn, is there anything that you want to plug? Anything you want to share?
Oh, I love plugging. Yeah, I have a few things to plug. They're all going to be in my link tree. I have a circle for trans and non-binary folks coming up on Thursday called Replenish Circle. It's a really sweet space where we actually talk about abundance and scarcity, and we get to talk about it in relationship to gender. It's a really sweet space. So if you want to join that, sliding scale. There's also going to be a free breathwork for gender exploration that I'm offering next Wednesday night. So in 10 days, that's going to be really sweet. And then I have a 7-week gender exploration course called Gender Sanctuary coming up in November. I'm really excited about it. Check that one out. If you want a coupon code, it's EB100 for $100 off for the rest of this week, which I'm just like, I just love this space. It feels revolutionary to have a space of mixed. It's like everybody is welcome. Or I shouldn't say that. All genders are welcome. Everybody who's interested in doing this is encouraged to come. This is a place where we really dive in and explore our own gender and our own relationship to gender and how it's linked to spirituality, which for me is like a huge link. So if anybody's interested in that, all the info is on my link tree.
Awesome. For anyone on MaryAnn's page, I'm doing my 6-week Boundaries and Consent course. That starts November 1st, and I am co-facilitating it with at mistress.vivienne. That's going to be 6 weeks. It meets twice a week. We're skipping Thanksgiving week. And then I'm probably not going to be teaching that exact same class again. I'll probably be teaching various iterations of it, sort of like spins on it. And then I also just posted on my website, but I'm not going to be promoting it yet because I was told it's confusing to promote 2 things at once. I just put it on my website and it's in my link tree if you're interested. I do have an upcoming class in December on consent and your business, where we're talking about all this stuff around capitalism. And then a class also in December called Consent Magic, where we will be working on protection spells and and asking for what you want as magic, as casting spells.
Oh, those sound so sweet. And I just, if it's okay that I share that I took your 6-week consent course in January and it was amazing. I can't thank you enough. And I think everybody should take it. Everybody should do consent work and gender exploration work.
I agree. All right, MaryAnn, thank you. I'll talk to you very soon.
Amazing. Thank you, Mia. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.